wave of violence seems to be sweeping through schools in that province. This year alone, about 50 teachers have reportedly been assaulted by learners. Let's bring in the Western Cape Education Department spokesperson, Bronagh Hammond, to understand how the province is responding to the crisis. Bronagh, good morning to you and welcome to the program. We have that number, 50 teacher assaults in just 5 months, almost one every 3 days, roughly. Is this the number for the Western Cape alone? And what does it say then about the state of discipline and safety in the province?
Yeah, I think the use of the words wave of violence is a bit strong, but, look, one case is one case too many. We have had 50 incidents reported in the Western Cape, but that also includes verbal assaults. So it's in physical and verbal assaults. There's been 50 incidents. And if you look at what we have, 1.2 million learners, that equals about 0.04% of the population in the Western Cape. But as I said, one case is one case too many, and we need to ensure that our learners go to school and have the respect for the teachers that they ultimately deserve.
What's your observation about why it is the way that it is?
I think, it's a lot of societal issues. There's also substance abuse, learners, smoking dagga before they get into school and then acting out in schools. And our teachers having to manage that behavior in the classroom. I think that's one of the biggest concerns. Also gangsterism, that also plays a part. And even, the trauma that some children are feeling and at home, and experiencing at home, and bringing that trauma into the classroom. So there's a lot of work that's done, especially in specific communities where there is high levels of gangsterism, substance abuse, and so forth, that we have these programs available for teachers so that they can get the tools and mechanisms to actually to manage a school classroom environment. We have a program called trauma classrooms that they can tap into, as well as other behavioral courses that they can go to, and how to ensure discipline in the classroom without having to use corporal punishment, for example, which is not allowed in our classrooms.
Do you believe it's working, Bronagh? I mean, give us a sense of when these sorts of programs as a way to support teachers were instituted, and whether you can see that it is having the desired impact in the classroom. I'm just thinking about some of these reports around continued teacher assaults at schools. There's one at the Manenberg High School. A teacher was allegedly assaulted with a brick by a grade 9 learner. So, the sense of a lack of psychological safety inside schools is one of the issues that they have to deal with in those types of scenarios as well.
Yeah, hearing those kind of stories, we heard about that incident last week, that teacher was verbally assaulted and then stones and a brick was thrown. He had to go to hospital thereafter. Not serious injuries, thankfully. But that is simply not tolerated or acceptable. And then we obviously have to ensure the disciplinary mechanisms are in place to address that. But at the same time is also to identify learners at risk. And what we do have in the province, which is unique to this province, is a behavior modification center that we've got, where we can identify learners at risk, those that are acting out in the classroom, those that need extra psychological support. And they're actually taken to this behavior center where they can actually get training for up to 4 weeks with psychologists, counselors, as well as continuing the academic program in this isolated environment, and then they can get back into the classroom in their normal environment, hopefully with the tools and mechanisms to actually manage their own anger issues, and also address it with the educator and how they can also manage the child going forward. Obviously every learner is special, and we need to try and tap into their unique talents and bring about the best in that learner, and not actually let them just, fade away into society. And so it is a challenge for our teachers. They've got so much on their plate already, but how do we provide them also with the tools to actually tap into those learners' unique talents so that they can feel proud of themselves and act out in a positive manner and not into a negative manner. And obviously there's also sports and arts and culture that can also play a role in driving that in the school environment as well. But we must not forget the role of the parent. And I think that's also something that we need to address.
I'll come back to that one in just a moment, Bronagh. I just want to go to the behavior modification centers. as a way to deal with disruptive learners. Are you saying that learners who have been identified as having a propensity for violence or who are dangerously troublesome in the classroom are identified and then taken out of the classroom and sent to these centres? How does that work practically?
So let's say you have a primary school learner that has, continues to behave in a disruptive manner, shows signs of violence, continuous reports, engagement with the parents is not going forward. We take the learner out of the classroom. Instead of expelling the learner, we take the learner outside the classroom and try and address his needs through psychological support and counseling support. We've got many programs that NGOs that we work with, like Waves for Change, surfing program. There's a butterfly program, which is about art and how we can tap into their talents in terms of using art. And they go through this kind of program for about a period of 4 weeks. And then, as I said, they get reintegrated back into the classroom, hopefully having the tools now to manage their anger or their trauma in a way that's positive rather than negative. It is something that we've had in place now for the last, I'd say, 3-4 years. We have got a program in Wynberg where we can bring the learners from the metro to, and now we're trying to expand it into the George Eden districts.
Has it been working, Bronagh?
Yes, yeah. The aim of the program is to ensure that those learners, change their behavior so that they don't end up being expelled, dropping out, for example. And so far, the results are very good. And we're actually very proud of the program and what it's achieved so far.
What are the success rates?
I don't have the figures with me now, unfortunately. I will have to get those.
All right. I think it's important to share that with the public, because if these interventions are seen to be working, at least that provides, one opportunity for sort of behavior intervention or rehabilitation at school. What we are also told is that many teachers are reportedly afraid or even ashamed to report violence for fear of consequences, particularly to their careers as well. What concrete steps have you taken to break a culture of silence and to protect those who are blowing the whistle on what's happening at their schools?
Yeah, that kind of statement does actually surprise me for the Western Cape. We have a Safe Schools hotline that we can encourage both parents, learners, and teachers to call in. But obviously, we've got our Abuse No More protocol, and we want to protect our teachers. And we have quite, a strong stance in terms of discipline, ensuring that your code of conduct can address those issues immediately. We have staff on board to provide advice to our school governing bodies in terms of those disciplinary procedures and steps going forward. And then, of course, also our wellness program for educators as well, in terms of where they can get psychological and counselling support, and also our whistleblowing policy in the Western Cape government, which is there also as a means to report these things. But there is a pathway that one can report any kind of abuse in schools in terms of our Abuse No More protocol. All teachers are trained in this protocol and how to address it in the school. So I have not come across that kind of statement in the Western Cape myself in the last 10 years, for example. But, if there is a teacher out there that does feel fearful, then there are these mechanisms that they can address, certainly, and they should do so immediately.
You would have seen the 2024 Stellenbosch study, which talks about the state of teaching and the experience of teachers in South Africa. Half of South African teachers in general want to leave the profession within 10 years due to some of the things you're experiencing in the Western Cape: violence, burnout, and lack of support. How difficult or challenging is it in your province particularly to retain teachers under what seem to be, as you've described, really hostile conditions?
Yes, we've seen the report. We've discussed, these aspects of the report. I think burnout is a big issue. Following COVID, which was in itself a unique circumstance, and then moving on from COVID to the recovery programs. And now we are in a stable kind of environment in terms of our school environments, but now we have these kind of issues that still persist in our communities in terms of gangsterism, substance abuse. And then, of course, the burnout in terms of administrative workload. That's something that we have looked at in the Western Cape and how we can address that and reducing that administrative workload for teachers. It's one of our focus areas in the last 2 years. And then, of course, psychological support for our teachers itself, and providing them with the tools and mechanisms to handle the classroom environment. So those programs are an offer in terms of our Cape Teaching and Leadership Institute, and then our wellness program as well, to provide that counselling and psychological support.
But I think, as you mentioned at the outset, there has to be more collaboration, I guess, with the communities themselves, parents. I mean, these kids, as you say, who've managed to have a positive turnaround in their behaviours in the classroom, having had that 4-week support, do change, but they're going back into these toxic environments, these environments that are filled with fear and high crime levels. What's next, do you think, in being able to build those networks within the community, through to the schools and the teachers and so on, to really, significantly transform and create better learner outcomes and teacher experiences in classrooms going forward?
Yeah, I think it's there is some degree of empathy and understanding that we all need, and when we got a child that's acting out, and to try and understand the circumstances that they are in, and I think it's amazing how many teachers do that and tap into why and the reasons behind that. And there are some terrible stories out there in terms of learners being neglected by their parents and in their home environment. And I think that is where we need to also work, and we do work with the Department of Social Development. We've got our own psychologists and counselors that work within each of our districts, but there are cases that we need to refer to DSD, for example, and child welfare in terms of their home environment, and more serious steps need to be taken, and obviously then it requires legal intervention as well.
Bronagh Hammond, thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it. She's the Western Cape Education Department spokesperson.